welcome to our podcast. I'm the Disturbed Southern Belle.
And I'm the gentleman.
We're continuing our series of some of the dark stories from old Hollywood, or just those crazy tales, you might say. And this week we're going to be talking about a very little known actress. Probably no one's ever heard of her, Elizabeth Taylor. And I say very jokingly, of course, because she's probably one of the most iconic actresses from that time,
Probably.
She's very, one of, not the, but one of, definitely. She's very well known. So she was born on February 27th, 1932 in London, England. She began her career as a child actress in the early 1940s and then went on to be one of the most iconic and popular stars of Hollywood in the 50s and 60s. So, a lot of people thought of her as like this all-American actress or whatever, but as I stated earlier, she was actually born in England. Though, she didn't really grow up there per se. She lived there for a little while. So, her parents, who were both from Kansas, had moved to London to open this art gallery. However, soon after welcoming their daughter into the world, they were faced with a very good reason to head back to the U.S. So shortly after, of course, she was born, around 1939-ish, when Taylor was around 7 years old, the threat of World War II was looming over Europe, as a lot of people probably, remember, or not remember per se, but have heard at the very least, history. U.S. Ambassador Joseph P. Kennedy personally reached out and suggested the family get the heck out of Europe. But instead of returning to Kansas, they ended up going to L.A., which, as you can imagine, was a big turning point for Miss Taylor. So, in Los Angeles, young Elizabeth certainly stood out from the crowd. People started suggesting that the Taylors put their daughter into the movie business. There was something about her eyes that caught people's attention. They were and she did. She had absolutely beautiful eyes. She had these eyes that were blue, and sometimes they would look almost purple. They were like violet almost. They were very pretty. She had very beautiful eyes. And she also had this condition which allowed her to grow double eyelashes, extra eyelashes. So that made her eye stand out even more. You know what I'm saying? It made her look like she was wearing like sort of fake eyelashes when she wasn't. That was just her natural. She had these really thick, lush eyelashes. Soon she had auditions set up with both Universal Pictures and Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer. While both studios wanted Taylor, her mother decided on Universal. However, Universal later had a problem with her. They said she didn't look like a child. After one small part in There's One Born Every Minute, the studio canceled her contract, and her career as a child actress looked pretty much over at that point. Then her father decided he was going to swoop in and help. So her father had a friend at MGM, and he managed to get her into an audition for a family movie about a boy and his dog. Taylor had an edge over the other girls who were auditioning, as she had the required English accent that they were wanting for the movie, because she'd grown up in England or whatever.
Right.
MGM was still not so sure about Taylor and only gave her a 3-month contract. She was cast in the movie Lassie Come Home. And she must have done something right, because following her performance, Universal offered her a 7-year contract. She again managed to use her British accent to her advantage in Jane Eyre and The White Cliffs of Dover. Sadly, these were very small parts, and she didn't even get to see her name on the screen. So she was sort of like an extra sort of thing, uncredited actress or whatever.
Right.
Taylor's accent would continue to be her golden ticket, but this time it would help her land a lead role. She also knew how to ride a horse, which gave her a leg up for the role of Velvet Brown opposite Mickey Rooney in National Velvet, but there was still one difficulty to overcome. The character was meant to be a tall young woman heading toward maturity, and Taylor was still a short 12-year-old kid. She knew that she had to do something extreme. She really wanted the part in National Velvet, so she started to make herself into a woman. She ate steak every day and doubled her portions for all meals. In 3 months, she had grown almost 8 centimeters or 3 inches and even started getting a little curvy. Crazy when you think about it, but whatever. MGM liked what they saw and they gave her the part, but sadly the studio wasn't completely satisfied with the way she looked. MGM had its own brutal way of turning Elizabeth Taylor into a full-fledged star. Not only did they insist she wear braces to perfect her smile, but they also had 2 of her baby teeth removed. Still, they went even further, making her change her hair color and the curve of her eyebrows. But there was one change that Taylor's parents would not stand for. MGM certainly had its way with Taylor, but when they tried to change her screen name to Virginia, her parents stood on business. They were all early clues that being a Hollywood actress wasn't always as glamorous as it seems. She made a splash with her performance in National Velvet, charming audiences and critics alike, but it also came at a high price. I don't know why they would want to change her name to Virginia. I mean, really,
I don't get that.
Elizabeth was perfectly fine, but whatever. Whether she liked it or not, she was now under the thumb of a very controlling studio. The actress later made a heartbreaking statement about the reality of becoming a child actress, expressing that the consequences of becoming a star was losing one's childhood. And I can imagine that's true for several of those during that era, or even today's, but yeah. She grew up too quickly, and with MGM pulling the strings of her life, the conditions she endured were downright heartbreaking. Becoming a star was no easy feat. She had to adhere to a rigorous schedule of schooling and filming throughout the day. In the evenings, there was no time to rest. Instead, she threw herself into singing and dancing lessons, not to mention the prep required for the next day of filming. But MGM did really know how to market her. So once she turned 15, they tried this new tactic. As a darling 15-year-old, she was now a young woman in the eyes of her studio, and they molded her image to reflect that of a normal teenager, quote unquote.
Right.
They lined up interviews and photo shoots for her that made her seem like she was living a carefree existence of dating and attending parties, but in truth, there was absolutely nothing normal about her teenage years. It was during this time that she began to step into more like romantic roles, like in 1947's Cynthia, in which she experienced her first on-screen kiss, and 1948's A Date with Judy. However, romance and dating weren't limited to her professional roles. Behind the scenes, her own love life kicked into gear for the first time. Even when it came to her dating decisions, MGM tried to steer the ship. Just a year after Cynthia came out, the studio dug their claws into her private life, selecting football star Glenn Davis to court the budding starlet. But the first romance was doomed from the beginning. Though Davis was a promising bachelor, he was also a soldier. Though Taylor and Davis planned to wed after he returned after serving in Korea, the impending nuptials got completely derailed. Ultimately, her first shot at love mustn't have been too serious because nothing came of their engagement announcement. Instead, she set her sights on the next bachelor up to bat, the son of a U.S. ambassador, William D. Pauley. Again, she got engaged, and again, it was a shockingly brief affair. However, there was a tragic reason why young Taylor wanted to get married so badly. She'd been severely sheltered her entire life. Her understanding of love was somewhat skewed by this upbringing that, and consequently, by her own admission, she naively thought that love was synonymous with marriage. So,
Right. Yeah.
and we know that's by far not necessarily true.
Yeah.
But that wasn't the only reason she wanted to marry young. Most devastatingly, Taylor saw marriage as an escape from being constantly micromanaged and controlled by both her studio and her parents. What she didn't realize was that marriage could be, in its own way, its own sort of cage or prison. Taylor learned the hard way that dating could be downright perilous. One of the most eyebrow-raising interludes of her young life was when the millionaire Howard Hughes took a special interest in her. The famous business magnate was a whopping 27 years older than her, and the way he tried to snag her as a bride is a little out there. So there's nothing more romantic than buying someone's love, right? So Howard Hughes made the despicable move of attempting to pay Taylor's parents for the right to her hand in marriage. So he tried to buy her to be married. He held up a six-figure offer, but thankfully Taylor managed to dodge this bullet and turned him down. This was a smart move, but this didn't mean that her next choice was any better. Her first attempt at being someone's wife was basically sort of a disaster. When Taylor finally settled on her Prince Charming in 1950, she made a terrible mistake, and his name was Conrad Hilton Jr., and he hailed from a very wealthy family. After all, the Hiltons had their own hotel chain, and the Hiltons. There's just saying that name should tell you something, right? Because, you definitely heard of Hilton hotels. But no amount of money could disguise Hilton's monstrous tree. Though their wedding was an extravagant, well-publicized occasion, only weeks after saying I do, Taylor began to realize that her married life was actually a real-life nightmare. To begin with, she and Hilton couldn't connect at all. They had barely anything in common, but that was just the tip of the iceberg. Hilton he had some deeply disturbing vices, such as drinking, gambling, substance use, we'll say, and the way he treated her was the worst part of all. He was physically and emotionally abusive, and the torment that she had to endure at the hands of her first husband was pretty bad. No, not pretty bad. It was brutal. Perhaps the most diabolical moment was when he brutally kicked her in the abdomen, and tragically she was carrying his child at the time, and it caused her to miscarry.
Ugh.
So, thankfully, she managed to secure a divorce just 8 months into the marriage, but her problems with men were just beginning. Strangely, just before marrying the two-faced Hilton, a similar thing happened to Taylor in a movie. The thriller Conspirator had Taylor playing a teenage bride who finds out her husband isn't quite who she thought he was. The film caused a stir because the man playing her husband was 37 and Taylor was just 16, which is a little creepy when you think of it.
It's a little creepy, yeah.
But whatever. Taylor was about to get a rude awakening about how sick Hollywood could be. The actor playing her on-screen husband in Conspirator shared her last name. He was Robert Taylor. Audiences found the age difference between the two Taylors a little icky, but this didn't stop Robert from hitting on her. It was her sad welcome to the real world of Hollywood, and in truth, there were more disappointments to come, as you can probably imagine.
Yeah.
Even though Taylor had rejected Robert Taylor's advances, it likely wasn't because he was too old. While filming the movie, she also met Michael Wilding, who was pretty close to the same age as Robert Taylor, and this May-December romance, they sort of clicked. They hit it off. And they took a walk down the aisle in a small ceremony in London, England. So it wasn't the age difference, she just didn't click with the other guy.
Right.
But if Taylor thought that husband number 2 might serve her up as a happily ever after, well, again, she was sorely mistaken. Her husband, Wilding, was also an actor, but didn't quite reach the same heights of success as his young bride. Well, I should say so. I've never even heard of him. As you can imagine, this made life difficult for the couple, though they did have 2 children together, both boys. Their marriage was soon in trouble. Luckily for Taylor, she was about to meet 2 very interesting and attractive men to lean on. In 1956, the epic film Giant was a huge moment in her life, and her career for that matter. First, she made 2 strong friendships with 2 of her co-stars. One was Rock Hudson, and the other was James Dean. So they were really, really, really good friends. They had really strong friendship. Dean, in particular, had a strange habit of pouring his heart out to Taylor in the evenings. However, when it came to actually working together on set, his behavior was quite shocking. As close as Taylor and Dean may have been in behind the scenes, sources say that Dean was quite cold with Taylor on the set, even blatantly ignoring her.
That's kind of weird.
It is very weird. While Taylor's friendship with Hudson would go on for years, it would not be the same with Dean. During the filming of Giant, James Dean tragically passed away in a car accident, and of course she had lost a very close friend. But the director, George Stevens, didn't seem to care. Stevens made her do a reaction shot for a scene she'd had with Dean, grappling with her grief. She ultimately spent 2 weeks in the hospital for depression. That's kind of sad.
It is very much so.
But other problems during Giant affected her home life. While Taylor was busy in Texas filming the movie, her husband got busy at home and not in a good way. One night he sent the kids to Taylor's parents' house and had a little party. The party was very small as there were just 2 dancers and himself.
Right.
Confidential magazine bought the story from the 2 women and published it. Unsurprisingly, a wild scandal ensued, eventually leading to the couple's divorce in 1957. Giant was a huge financial and critical success. Though it received an astonishing 10 Academy Award nominations, not one was for Taylor. In fact, on the awards night, the entire film got left out except for George Stevens, who took home the Best Director trophy. Taylor's first taste of receiving an award was still way off on the horizon. 1957's Raintree County was MGM's way of trying to cash in on the gold mine they previously had with Gone with the Wind. They had this best-selling book, an epic story, and some of the most top-line talent at the time, which included Elizabeth Taylor. It seemed like a recipe for success. Sadly, this was a financial flop due mostly to the screenplay. It did get her second nomination, though, for another Academy Award. She did lose again, but it didn't matter. She had more amazing offers coming her way. She then starred in Cat on a Hot Tin Roof opposite Paul Newman in 1958. At this time, she had a new husband, film producer Mike Todd, whom she'd married in 1957 and had a daughter with. However, their love story was tragically brief. In March 1958, he had plans to travel to New York to collect an award, and Taylor desperately wanted to go with him. There was a slight twist of fate that kind of basically saved her life. In the end, something came up and she was not able to accompany her husband on his journey. She got sick and, wasn't able to fly or whatever, or was recommended that she flew or whatever. And he didn't want her to go anyway, because she wasn't feeling well. So he goes off on his little plane, which was named the Liz, L-I-Z.
Yeah.
And it crashed. There was no survivors, but there was something else that made the disaster even eerier. Just hours before Taylor lost her husband, he spoke to his friends about how safe his plane was. He said, "It's a good, safe plane. I wouldn't let it crash. I'm taking along a picture of Elizabeth, and I wouldn't let anything happen to her." But he was, sadly wrong. Well, I don't guess he was in the fact that I guess he didn't technically let anything happen to her, but,
Right.
he couldn't control some things. We'll say that. Unfortunately, Taylor was in the middle of filming Cat on a Hot Tin Roof when she lost Todd and barely had any time to grieve. The show must go on, they say. Well, at least that's the belief Taylor had to embrace while drowning in grief. Not only did the studio not want her to take a break from filming, but she also had to face the stress of handling the high debts her husband had left behind. That's another thing that's sickening to me. They don't even want her to take off any time. Not necessarily to grieve, but, they act like they don't even want you to take off time to even go to the funeral or something. Just keep on going. 3 weeks after the plane crash, Taylor was back in front of the camera, which is not much time because there's going to be investigations. There's going to be different things like that. So, they pretty much had just buried this man, and then she's right back in it. Taylor had the sympathy of all of Hollywood, and then she lost it for the most scandalous reason imaginable. While she was filming Cat on a Hot Tin Roof, she started a torrid affair with none other than Eddie Fisher. If there was any beau in the business that could make tongues wag, it was Fisher. You see, he was married to the beloved actress Debbie Reynolds, and is also Carrie Fisher's dad, if you didn't know. Ironically enough. Debbie Reynolds is her mother, but, Carrie Fisher, right, from Star Wars. The public had quite a fascination with the picture-perfect couple, whom they considered America's sweethearts. But even worse, Reynolds was supposed to be Taylor's old friend, and had previously been even her matron of honor at one of her weddings. So, it's kind of bad,
It is.
So, Fisher had been Todd's best friend, which, he had died. So, but that was the most jaw-dropping part. According to Reynolds, it was she who sent him to Elizabeth's side because you knew she was grieving and everything. She sent him there to kind of help her, comfort her. You know what I'm saying? He was his husband's best friend. Blah 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 blah. She likely never expected the two would spark up a romance. So Fisher became Taylor's soft place to land after the loss of her husband. And as such, they effectively kicked off one of the entertainment's most notorious love triangles of all time. took only a month for Fisher to leave Reynolds for Taylor.
Jesus.
So, yeah, it was quick. But the fallout of this adultery became legendary. The tabloid stories were utterly explosive, as this juicy piece of gossip had seemingly come out of nowhere. Taylor's reputation would never be the same. The media cast her as the homewrecker, while Eddie was portrayed as the villainous cheater, and Debbie, of course, emerged with a world of support behind her. However, MGM saw the negative publicity as an excellent marketing opportunity.
Of course they did.
Of course. MGM capitalized on Taylor's new bad girl image by dressing her in a provocative slip for the posters for Cat on a Hot Tin Roof, which effectively gave the public the seductrix they so loved to hate.
Right.
This turned out to be an ingenious move, as the film went on to gross $10 million in the U.S., which would have been a lot of money back in those days.
Absolutely.
On top of becoming one of the most profitable actresses, Taylor also received high praise for her acting chops and walked off with a nomination and her new man. Though both Taylor's and Reynolds' careers were only bolstered by the cheating scandal, there was one person it utterly ruined, and that was Eddie Fisher. The public just couldn't forgive him for turning his back on his family to marry Taylor, and his career just never recovered. The next year, his variety TV program was canceled, and many of his contracts got slashed.
Oh no.
Taylor's career, on the other hand, it was flourishing. While Eddie's career tanked in 1959, her career went on to, she went on to star in another hit, Suddenly Last Summer, which procured her yet another Academy Award nomination. However, once again, she didn't get to bring it home. So something had to change in her mind. Next, MGM wanted Taylor to star in Butterfield 8. This story was about a very promiscuous woman, pretty much aligned, and I won't say pretty much. It did align with what the public view of her was. They thought she was just a very promiscuous woman, and maybe she was. I don't know. For this reason, Taylor didn't want to do it. She didn't want it because that's how everybody was seeing her, and she didn't want to be portrayed like that anymore. But her feelings didn't really matter to MGM, as you can imagine. In the end, the studio won, and she begrudgingly did what she was told. Ironically, this was the film for which she finally got her Academy Award for Best Actress. Completing her contract with the studio, she freed herself of MGM. Her next role would herald in one of the most infamous chapters of her life. You could call the next years of her life the Burton years, as Richard Burton dominated her life both personally and professionally. The two actors connected on the set of the movie Cleopatra, a film that benefited Taylor's career immensely. She was the first star to receive $1 million check for a single performance. That would have been a big deal back in those days.
Absolutely.
Plus, the film was a huge hit for 20th Century Fox, but it wasn't a success in the beginning. During filming, the production costs of Cleopatra went through the roof, and 20th Century Fox blamed a lot of the problems on Taylor. She'd gotten sick, which delayed filming. She also gained weight, which the critics picked on. Of course they did. Also, her antics with Burton caused media stir. The antics also cost Taylor something more than just money. They took away her privacy, as you can imagine.
Right.
During the filming of Cleopatra, both Taylor and Burton had spouses, so they were both married. Of course, their vows didn't stop them from diving headfirst into this passionate affair.
Of course not.
Of course, rumors of their infidelity ran rampant, but this scandal became a glaring fact when a photographer got a shot of Taylor and Burton, cavorting on a yacht. I don't know exactly what they were doing, but anyway.
Leave it up to the
Kissing,
imagination.
whatever. They were, obviously together in a romantic way, we'll say. Unfortunately for Taylor and Burton, the media's fascination with them was just getting started. Taylor enraged more than just her fans. Not only did the Vatican condemn the philandering couple, but even the U.S. Congress considered banning them from returning to America.
Jesus.
I mean, really, right? That's nuts.
That was a reaction.
I mean, really, it's kind of comical when you think. I mean, I'm not condoning cheating or anything, but you know what I mean? Yeah, that's kind of crazy. But whatever. But despite the ire of the public, Taylor had no plans to end things with Burton. both of them obtained divorces, and then in 1964, they got married in Montreal, Canada. It was a wedding that lit up the gossip columns like no other. Taylor and Burton were the perfect subjects for the press, who nicknamed them Liz and Dick and announced that they were the marriage of the century. But perhaps what fascinated the world the most was the couple's outrageous spending habits. Reportedly, they spared no expense with their fortune funding a lifestyle of unbelievable luxury, one filled with furs, diamonds, paintings, designer clothes, travel, food, liquor, a yacht, a jet, just whatever they wanted. However, though they may have sailed smoothly on open waters, their marriage didn't enjoy the same peaceful trajectory. In 1966, Taylor and Burton starred in the acclaimed film Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf, filling the roles of middle-aged couple with deepening marriage troubles. Faced with the challenge of playing a 50-year-old Martha, Taylor had to undergo a dramatic transformation. She donned a wig, put on weight, and applied makeup that made her look rather haggard. It certainly wasn't a glamorous role, but her performance was unforgettable and earned her another Academy Award. Both Taylor and Burton's careers were flying high at that time. But as a couple, they were clashing so brutally that the public couldn't help but take notice. Though Taylor and Burton would star in 11 films together, their relationship was equally aggressive as it was passionate. They couldn't keep their hands off one another in more ways than one. Soon people had begun calling them the Battling Burtons. As the years passed, their drinking habits and constant clashing led them straight to the edge, and they ended up divorcing in 1974. Though Taylor and Burton's first marriage crashed and burned, it was by no means over. In 1975, they remarried, only for their union to end again. This time, they didn't even make it a year. By her own admission, though, no man could ever compare to Burton. After Richard, the men in my life were just there to hold the coat, to open the door. All the men after Richard were really just company. So, sadly, Taylor was about to lose another man she felt close to. She'd already lost James Dean, of course, to that car accident, but now it looked like she would lose another giant co-star. In 1985, Rock Hudson announced that he was fighting for his life against AIDS. Taylor stepped up and started the National AIDS Research Foundation with Michael Gully. I don't know how to pronounce his name. Sadly, she lost her dear friend Hudson in October of that year. It was time for Taylor to change her focus. She was going into business. Taylor was the first movie star to have a celebrity-branded fragrance. She worked with Elizabeth Arden to make Passion in 1987 and then White Diamonds in 1991, which was a huge deal back in the 90s. That White Diamonds.
Even I know about it.
White Diamonds, I remember, was just like, ugh. Oh, Passion was a pretty big one too, but White Diamonds just seemed like it was crazy. Her biographers claim that she actually made more income from the sale of her fragrances than she did from her whole acting career. Jeez.
That is insane.
It is. However, although the 80s were a productive time for Taylor, she also struggled with her tragic demons. Behind the scenes, she grappled with multiple health issues. Not only was she born with scoliosis, but her chronic pain could be traced all the way back to a chilling accident early in her career. In 1944, she fell from a horse while filming National Velvet and unknowingly broke her back.
Jeez.
Unknowingly broke her back. Oh my gosh.
How do you unknowingly
I don't
break
know.
your back?
The fracture she sustained went undiagnosed for years, and the consequences were devastating. Years later, in 1956, Taylor underwent a very scary surgery which swapped out some of her spinal discs with donated bone. But that wasn't all. The next decades wouldn't be any kinder to her physical body as she endured several bouts of pneumonia and an emergency hysterectomy. Sources say that in an effort to self-medicate, she turned down a very dangerous path. But in the 80s, she found herself in a disheartening predicament. She became heavily addicted to drinking and painkillers, which I guess so. Though she sought out treatment, staying at the Betty Ford Center, her road to recovery wasn't easy, and as you'll hear here shortly, when it came to her health, fate had even crueler twists in store for her. At the beginning of that horrendous decade in 1981, she separated from her sixth husband, Senator John Warner, and divorced him the following year. It wouldn't be until 1988 that she met her seventh and final husband, Larry Fortensky. While she was struggling with her recovery from addiction and rehab, they met at the Betty Ford Clinic. Sadly, this was no fairy tale ending for her. In 1996, her husband got on the wrong side of the law, and authorities apprehended him after they found him staying in an unlicensed motorhome in Hemet, California, and charged him with substance abuse. But that wasn't the worst part. There was also a woman with him whom he claimed was his live-in maid. That same year, yeah, I know, Taylor and Larry divorced. However, there was no bad blood between them. According to Taylor, it was her own health problems and his struggles with OCD that caused the marriage to crumble. However, she continued to prove her love for him from afar. A few years later, she covered his hospital expenses when he fell from a balcony. And in the end, she even kept him in her will. So, I guess, they were okay with each other. Still, there was only one man whom she never really let go of. The relationship that ultimately defined her love life was going to be her connection, of course, to Richard Burton.
Right.
In fact, she even took a part of him to her grave. Throughout their time together, Burton wrote Taylor many love letters, and he just so happened to pen one just a few days before he passed. The most tragic detail about Burton's last love letter to Taylor was that she did not receive the correspondence until she returned home from his memorial service. As the story goes, when she realized that the handwriting was Burton's, she began to weep. Quite famously, Taylor kept the contents of this letter a secret, stashing it safely by her bed for the next 27 years of her life. However, there was one part of the letter that she did supposedly reveal. Though Taylor didn't spill all the beans, so to speak, about the letter, she eventually told biographers, in it he told me what he wanted. Home was where Elizabeth was, and he wanted to come home. If this is true, then Taylor made sure that a part of Burton in his letter would always be with her. The last 20 years of her life were undoubtedly difficult. Her health problems, of course, continued to mount, meaning that she, could even barely got out in public or anything.
Right.
So some of her personal woes included hip replacements. She had this benign brain tumor. She had congestive heart failure. And through it all, her back pain was, of course, causing her huge discomfort. And it eventually caused her to have to be in a wheelchair. Still, the screen legend managed to greet death with style and grace. She even left behind some iconic instructions for her funeral. On March 23, 2011, Elizabeth Taylor succumbed to congestive heart failure. However, as per her request, she wanted to be late to her own funeral, and so the ceremony began 15 minutes late. She wanted to be fashionably late. In the years since her passing, the name Elizabeth Taylor still holds power as one of Hollywood's greatest actresses. There's still little chance she will ever be forgotten. And that's probably true. She's definitely one of the biggest ones out there, and she was absolutely beautiful back in the day. I mean, she was a very, well, I mean, she wasn't necessarily ugly at the end, but you get what I'm saying.
Right.
But she did have a rough life, and goodness gracious, I mean, that back injury, I mean, that's nuts.
I don't see how you break your back and not even realize it.
And no one, a doctor or no one never find it, for years and years. That's crazy to me. But I guess, who knows?
Maybe it was just limitations of the time or something.
Maybe that was it. Maybe it was just not as, I don't know. But that's nuts. But anyway, we hope you enjoyed that segment. Don't forget to like, follow, and subscribe. And don't forget to stay disturbed.